on today's Thinking Christian on Life Audio.
Hey everyone, I'm James Spencer. Welcome to Thinking Christian. I'm here with Alin Vrancila, and we are going to talk today about the Transhumanist Declaration, specifically about really the first tenet of the Transhumanist Declaration. And the point that we're trying to get across here is that some of these declarations within the Transhumanist Declaration actually don't sound too bad. They aren't things that you would immediately disagree with. But I think there are real implications for how we think Christianly about transhumanism, about technology. And these are a great group of folks to interact with because they're really dedicated to technological advancement. And so they've thought through this an awful lot. And it's just interesting to kind of consider what they have to say. So, Alin, welcome. Thanks for being on Thinking Christian here. And any initial thoughts on this?
Well, thank you for having me. And I actually think it's exciting that we have something on paper to work with. Now we have a declaration. And as any declaration, we don't see the unintended consequences. And that's why I'm very excited to at least wrestle with it, to figure out, okay, what is something that we're not seeing here?
It'd be kind of nice if AI had one of these, right? I mean,
I really am quite certain they're going to have one.
I will say, I think it's interesting that transhumanism has one of these and AI doesn't, because transhumanism, as I've kind of gotten a little deeper into it, and I wouldn't say that I know all of it, inward, backwards, and forwards just yet, but it does feel a little bit more ideological to me. It feels a little bit more religious to me. That there is a clear trajectory, or what we might call in Christian circles a telos, an end to this. It has sort of an eschatological and utopian flavor that is largely, I think, underlying artificial intelligence, but made a little bit more explicit in the transhumanist literature.
I'm curious what you think about this, but it might be that right now is commercialized. So it's not as much as an idealization of it, or as much as a philosophical approach, or even centralized. I found it really interesting that Elon Musk himself went against the rapid system and rapid rhythm of how AI is actually exploding everywhere. He said we need to slow it down. That's the first time I think I heard him say we need to slow something down, right? But because I think he felt somewhat uncomfortable, I'm assuming now, on how fast this is going, but it was more of a rapid commercial drive. As in the transhumanist conversation has been around for a while, humanity 2.0 is really it's becoming an ideology, right? And it's now we have a declaration to work with, which I'm excited about. I'm curious if this is why we're not seeing two declarations in that space.
It may very well be. I mean, artificial intelligence does feel a little bit more like the Wild Wild West to me right now. Yes. I think there are varying philosophies driving it. One of which, as you rightly mentioned, I think is an economic philosophy.
Yes.
People are really seeing this as something, artificial intelligence that can minimize expenses in various different businesses, make everything more efficient is usually the way you hear that. But when I hear efficiency, what I really hear is we're going to maximize profits. Wow. No need for those pesky humans around if we can make technology do it. And so, more efficiency generally isn't great for human beings when we're talking about technology. But that's definitely one of the philosophies driving AI. I would also say that transhumanism probably does scooch into the artificial intelligence realm. Yes. And that the interesting part, I think, about transhumanism is it doesn't appear that they are trying to eliminate humanity. There have been, at least not in all circles. Now, there are some people who might say that we won't need aspects or certain people within humanity. That gets a little strange. I haven't looked into all of that yet. But for the most part, transhumanism presents itself as a philosophy that is pro-human. And so this first tenet really does underscore that, I think. So let me read it, and then we can kind of discuss from a biblical and theological perspective and even a technological perspective, what the implications might be for this and how Christians particularly might think about it. So here's the first tenet of the Transhumanist Declaration. Humanity stands to be profoundly affected by science and technology in the future. we envision the possibility of broadening human potential by overcoming aging, cognitive shortcomings, involuntary suffering, and our confinement to planet Earth. That's the first tenet of transhumanism. Any initial thoughts, Alin, or you want me to kick it off?
Yeah, I would love for you to kick it off. There's so much to work here, to work with here. There's so much to work with here. Please.
Yeah, I mean, let's just talk about the first one. The broadening human potential by overcoming aging. Overcoming aging. I mean, I just celebrated a birthday, right? So I'm 46 now.
Okay. Happy birthday.
Yeah, thanks. You get overcoming aging. I'm most familiar with this with like fitness. There's a guy, Peter Attia, who does a lot of work on training for I think he calls it like the Centennial Marathon or something like that. How do you live to be 100? And if you look at exercise effects on the body, it has a better benefit than things that would shorten your life, like cancer or other things. It has like, tenfold more benefit to longevity than those things have to actually shorten your life. Mm-hmm. And so I'm used to hearing that kind of claim and hearing that kind of conversation in the exercise industry. Here it takes on a little different feel and flavor, right? Overcoming aging in the transhumanist language is generally talking about something a little bit more extreme. It's either talking about overcoming death completely. Not only I won't look as if I've aged, which can be part of it, but also actually never dying. And that never dying can be construed in a number of different ways. And just, to give people a kind of a vague understanding of this, it isn't always just that, you'd be always preserved in the state that you're in now. So like when I'm 190, I'd look exactly like I do now because we've overcome the effects of aging. It could very well be that my brain has been downloaded into an AI sort of model, and that my consciousness, whatever it is, because nobody really knows, right? Good luck defining that one, lives on in some sort of AI-enabled robot.
Yes.
Right? So there's a range of different ways that they've contemplated overcoming aging.
Yes.
And ultimately death.
So I was in San Francisco, and there was a science conference going on, and I found myself in a really weird situation being at the conference. And the presentation there concerned me to my core because it was on the plasticity of the brain. And they connected plasticity of the brain directly with longer living. So really fighting agency there. And they said, we took a mouse, and through the plasticity of the brain, through the exercise of the brain, we prolonged the mouse's life. And I was excited. It was interesting. It became very interesting in that. But what was fascinating to me is so I asked the question. I was like, okay, question. How did you do that? Right? How did it actually work? Right? And said, the entire scientific experiment landed being on this one little dot, and said, we assumed when the mouse was supposed to die. And from that point on, he lived this much longer, right? And I didn't get a chance to ask another question, but it was a very simple follow-up question. How did you assume
right
when the mouse was supposed to die? It was, for me, that science was so broken. Every single person in this massive coliseum stood up and applauded. There's the massive success of the actual science, right? But it was concerning to me to say that we really had major leaps into what aging does, why is it involved, even theologically, why God put a limit to when we're supposed to live, how we're supposed to live, and why God responded to our longevity of life as a reaction to what we did with our lives.
Yeah.
What did we do when we lived 1,000 years? What did we do when we lived 800 years? And how those people died being sick and tired of living and of observing the brokenness of humanity. And God said, I think I'm going to have to put a limit to this. So I'm curious, from a theological, I'm bringing it back into your area, if this the first tenet in the first bullet point of the first tenet is we need to make this longer. We need to reverse what God has done. We need to assume like we can fix this without actually thinking why it became a problem.
Yeah, and I think, from a theological perspective, that is my biggest challenge with the idea of overcoming aging. Mm-hmm. Overcoming aging, when you think about just some of the basic biblical teachings about this, the wages of sin is death. Mm-hmm. Christ's resurrection, right, is an overcoming of death. Christ now lives eternally, bodily form, newly made body in heaven. And we're supposed to share in a resurrection like his at some point. When we start to substitute solutions to sin and its consequences, or its wages in this case, which is death, when we start to substitute new things in there other than Christ, I think we're making a crucial theological error.
Yes.
In other words, we're looking at it in terms of, we're seeing death as a symptom of something. Mm-hmm. And so again, the way I would argue that this tends to read is that we're going to treat a symptom.
Yes.
We're going to treat the symptom of death, and we're not going to get to the root cause of that symptom, which is sin.
Yes.
And so from a theological perspective, I see this as a flawed project. It's not, and I think it's important to note, because there's a difference in my mind between something like healthcare and transhumanism. Arguably, healthcare seeks to prolong life. And as we see deficiencies in the human body, illnesses, injuries, those kind of things, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, healthcare professionals are trained to help overcome some of those injuries and diseases.
Yes.
And to functionally prolong life, right? A way it might be better said is to preserve life.
Yes. Yes.
This isn't that exactly, right? This is a completely different thing. This is saying human beings can actually not die. Mm-hmm. We cannot experience those effects that sin brings about. There's a technological solution to this. It is, if I were being extreme about it, I would say what they're really trying to create is a technological Messiah.
Yes. Yes.
And that to me is uncomfortable, even if the overall claim isn't that crazy, right? Technology has prolonged life. I mean, we see life expectancy increasing, particularly in the United States and other, technologically enhanced nations or technologically savvy nations. Our life expectancy increases. Mm-hmm. This isn't even that.
No.
Right? This is a sort of a limitless expansion of that, which I think is just wrong-headed. And so that's where I'd kind of sit. At the same time, what I would say, and this is a little bit different take on than a lot of people have on it, but when I look at the Tower of Babel narrative, Genesis 11, 1 through 9, I do not see people trying to rebel against God. Mm-hmm. I see them reacting and responding to real threats, real human threats. Right? We don't want to be scattered. Being scattered is scary. Being scattered is a difficulty we don't want to face. Mm-hmm. And so is there a solution to being scattered? Sure, we can come up with something. Let's do it. And we have all this capacity. And so now we're going to build a city and a tower, and we're all going to live together, and it's going to be fantastic.
Yes.
And so I don't want to frame transhumanism in terms of these people are horrible human beings who believe this stuff. They're crazy thinkers, they're evil people, whatever. Because if we follow the narrative of that Tower of Babel, the reason that God comes down and stops them is because if they can build this city and this tower, nothing they purpose to do will be beyond them. God recognizes it's not that they can't do it. That's the problem. It's that they can do it. That's the problem. And so I think a lot of this that they're talking about could potentially be accomplished. I think technology can prolong our lives in some real significant ways, which is deceptive in the sense that it gives us the impression that eventually, if we just keep following the tech, we will no longer have death. scary.
You're listening to Thinking Christian with Dr. James Spencer. When we come back, James and Alin will continue this conversation on transhumanism. This is Thinking Christian on Life Audio.
Hey friends, Nicole Eunice here from the How to Study the Bible podcast. I want to invite you to experience a fresh look at the story of Joseph and what it means for you today. Life can totally throw us for a loop, whether it's your family or your marriage, work, church, or something else entirely. Maybe you have found yourself in a season that you never would have expected and that you certainly wouldn't have signed up for. In this 6-week Bible study together, we're going to talk about the biblical story of Joseph, a man who lived an unexpected life and trusted God through it all. We'll talk about the blessings he experienced, the promises God keeps, the way that tests of our character can actually refine our faith. We'll talk about patience. We'll talk about loss, absolutely talk about redemption. So come join us for the 6-week series over on the How to Study the Bible podcast. Can't wait to dive in with you.